Hey, everybody. Welcome to our hastily changed steering committee meeting. I apologize for that. I was elected to be chair of the North Sound Behavioral Health ASO, and they need me to meet in person, and that I have to be there at noon tomorrow. So there was no way I could make this meeting on Thursdays. So Jill and I are coordinating the rest of the year on how that would work. So I apologize for that, and it's so last minute. Um, let's start out with our land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Jill?
Thank you. Yes, Chair Buchanan, if it's okay with you, I'd like to add an agenda item.
Certainly.
Items for the January IPRTF agenda.
I will put that right before other business.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first item on our agenda today is the steering committee 2024 regular meeting schedule. I think that's now going to be changed, or did you already make those changes, Joe?
Well, I wanted to get input from the steering committee. There are a number of dates that fall on that second Thursday that you'll be otherwise committed. So I wanted to just go ahead and overall change the regular meeting schedule. Do you want me to screen share those dates?
Sure.
Hopefully everyone's got their calendars handy. So if you see here on the right-hand side, the steering committee column, the April, June, July, August, and September all fall on those second Thursdays of the month. Would doing what we did today work for everyone? Just doing it Wednesday instead of Thursday. So April 10th, June 11th, July 10th, August 7th, and September 11th.
I think that would work for me. I don't know about others.
As of right now, it works for me. I can't guarantee it's not going to change.
Well, yeah, I think we're all there. So
at what time do we want to do 1 o'clock right now, or do we want to stay with the original 11 a.m. meeting time? Either one is fine with me.
1 o'clock for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I like this time too.
Yeah,
Okay.
not to go over the lunch hour. Thanks.
Okay, so that takes care of that. The next item on our agenda is the Justice Project implementation and kind of some of the work that's starting to roll out. Tyler and I and Jill, we met a couple weeks ago over the holiday period and talked about JPOP. That's the Justice Project Oversight. What's the P on the end? I can't remember. Anyway, planning. Okay. So the ordinance specifies that the IPTRF will create a JPOP to monitor various things and then create a report. So Tyler and I and Jill started kicking around what that might look like and how we might go about doing it. And we kind of all three came to the same conclusion that we should maybe look at the entire IPTRF being the JPOP. and then adding any of those missing components that were in the ordinance or, membership to the IPTRF. So I think what Jill has done is she's got an example of a kind of a cross-reference table that shows kind of the overlap between the proposed JPOP and the existing IPTRF and what would be needed to build it out to meet the criteria of the ordinance. So I'll turn that over to you, Jill, if you're comfortable with leading us through that piece.
Sure, I can do that. I'm gonna screen share right quick. I did have to make one amendment. Let me get down to that page, 1 second.
So while you're doing that, I can kind of give a little background on some of the reasoning that we had when we had this idea. One was obviously an efficiency and in meetings, and a lot of the people, most of the people that are on both entities are very busy people, and it just would make more sense to have all that in one meeting, in one group. It'd be easier for staff to manage, to produce all the material for. So it would just be a more concentrated effort. Tyler, I don't know, you want to weigh into, you had some ideas on, why you thought this would work well.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, I think the community has really kind of grown to trust the IPRTF and the organizational structure and the members that are on it. It kind of helps continue to be one voice on the topic. And when we started to cross-reference the positions in the task force to the positions on the JPOP, it became kind of a lot of overlap between the two. And, just thinking back to when the JPOP conversation happened at council and some community discussion on it, it was kind of a request to ensure open, transparent, and the right stakeholders are at the table, and kind of expand the stakeholders to the discussion of implementation and strategies that will be funded from the public safety tax. But I'm not sure back in July, we were really able to kind of consciously really think through how that worked and functioned. And so I think just kind of sitting down and looking at the task force and looking at the JPOP and ensuring the vision and the intent is still absolutely there, but trying maybe not to duplicate efforts if we can accomplish that.
Yeah, right. And the other thing about kind of what you talked about with the council action when we passed the ordinance, we were basically taking membership off of the finance oversight committee and just moving it over to the JPOP because council members didn't agree with some of the membership of the finance committee. So they just kept saying, sweep it over to the JPOP. And so, like Tyler said, not much consideration went into things like overlap and meeting efficiency. And we obviously didn't have time to think that through. It was all 11th hour. So, anyway, that's kind of the background and some of the thinking that went into this. So Jill, can you walk us through this kind of this matrix?
I can. So, as you mentioned, Councilmember Buchanan, you and Tyler had asked me to try to compare all the positions on the left. You'll see the current IPRTF position, who's appointed in that position right now, and the comparable position listed in the JPOP list of members. On the right-hand column here, they have a supportive housing subject matter expert, behavioral health provider, substance use disorder treatment provider. These two positions are coming up vacant. This is Greg Winter's position and Steven's position. If we appoint someone to these positions at the next council meeting that could fit one of these representations, then that will take care of those. Positions that just aren't on the IPRTF right now are these right here in the right-hand column. Recovery subject matter expert. This is one I need you all to define for me a little bit, because I don't know how this differs from an SUD treatment provider. So I'm not sure what the thinking was there. Reentry specialist. 2 of 2 criminal legal system users, so we would add a second one. Because this specifically says a user, not a family member, and right now Deborah Hawley is a family member, so that might be something to consider, whether this is whether you want to have a little leeway there and just have Deborah Hawley fill this second position. A youth teen court rep, I need to reach out to teen court for those folks, and rec member, and the rec has not been appointed yet, but I think that's happening soon. Permanent members on the JPOP, and also as required to be on the Law and Justice Council by the RCW. So the tribal representatives here, of course, county council member, county executive, the Law and Justice Council, RCW says the county risk manager. I think that's the executive, Tyler, yeah.
Yep.
So you can see how these compare as well on the JPOP. And positions that are on Law and Justice Council only and are not listed in the JPOP committee. This is the rest of the IPRTF right here. Now this is in your packet if you have those handy and want to look at it off screen. I will let you know that what's in your packet was incorrect. I had Arlene Feld here mistakenly under the consumer position right here. So this is corrected as you see it now. It's incorrect in your packet.
So Jill, when you scroll down to the other, this section, this is just trying to show that the permanent IPRTF positions
Yes.
are also either shown on JPOP or on the Law and Justice Council.
Correct. Yes.
And
So-
then the last part is those aren't on the JPOP, but they are on the Law and Justice Council.
Right, so if you all decide to recommend the membership of the IPRTF change, these will still need to stay. We can't remove these because they are required for the Law and Justice Council.
So is there, if you scroll back up, these positions are on the JPOP and are on the IPRTF.
And the Law and Justice Council,
And the Law and Justice.
right. And these are our permanent members that are not appointed by the county council.
And so really it would be looking at the appointed members by the county council and how they fill the role of the task force and JPOP.
Yeah, that's
So-
why we held off on appointments last night until the 23rd, because we wanted to sort through this first.
And it just thinking out loud for a second, it could be a subcommittee of the task force. If we allowed for the task force to add a couple of members or to modify their membership.
Yeah.
Then like of the total, how many are on the task force, Jill? 36 or something like that?
Right now, the total number of spots are 30, I think, but there are a few vacancies. The two tribal positions are vacant. We haven't seen anyone from Peace Health. We're working on getting some small cities representation for small city council and the small city municipal court. So, but
and the ordinance.
overall,
Oh, go ahead.
overall it's 30, yes.
And how many are on the JPOP? It's okay, you don't know that answer. It's probably
I don't.
or 16.
Yeah, it'd be a large subcommittee,
Yeah,
but that's fine. I mean,
right.
So
And-
if we added, Tyler, following that line of thinking, if we added new positions to the IPRTF or a subcommittee, it's these positions here. We would need to add,
To the task force.
yes,
And then that task force could make a decision if they wanted to kind of share in that decision-making of the JPOP or actually just have a separate subcommittee for JPOP specific efforts.
I mean, having a separate subcommittee, I would imagine I would have to count clearly, but I would imagine this constitutes
Oh.
close to a quorum of the IPRTF.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you would be, yeah, you're right. So,
So it's almost like by law, we'd have to have it as just the quorum of the task force itself because there's so much overlap.
Correct.
yep.
So it's almost just to implement the J-pop as written and as requested by council. We need to add a few people to the IPRTF and we have a quorum issue. So really, council, would you be okay with just the task force being amended to add some positions and taking that role on?
And that's what we want to take to the council on the 23rd. We don't want to sit on this. We want to get this rolling. So, but we wanted to bring it to this group today to get feedback from you all.
I think we should just add those positions and move forward.
Other thoughts? Stephen, I know you
Yeah.
kind of leaned into the thought about the subcommittee idea, right?
Well, that was the idea of the planning team that set up the implementation plan. So that's why I was articulating that. I do have two questions about this. One is, I don't know what you think about the fact that I'll just say it. There are 3 people on this that would go onto the oversight committee who voted against the plan. And I don't know how you want to handle that. Maybe you just consider that a diversity of opinion, but if you're overseeing a plan that they had serious qualms about, that would be a little complicated situation in my mind. The other thing is, while I do agree that the community as a whole trusts the task force, it was very clear that a sizable plurality of the community does not. And there were a lot of voices. Jason said he talked to a lot of people who didn't like the plan. Jason never identified who those people were. But I thought part of the J-pop idea was to include voices that hadn't been part of the work so far, to sort of either acknowledge or educate or whatever the process would yield from that with other voices. And this sort of loses track of that purpose.
Well, the voices would be there because of the additional membership.
Well, these are not the voices I thought they were referring to. As I said, nobody identified who those voices were, so I may be wrong, but I thought they were more grassroots voices.
Raylene?
Stephen, the new positions that they're talking about, 2 positions, users preferably formerly incarcerated. Do you think that would fit what you're saying? Is, I mean, I think if we're adding people that were formerly incarcerated, we're adding a different voice, a different perspective. I wouldn't mind adding some of the interpreters that are working with these defendants on a regular basis. That's just another thought.
I think those would add some of those voices, but you're asking formerly incarcerated people not only to do the J-pop work, but the task force work then also, which seems like a big ask, but maybe there are people interested in that.
I
Mike?
think if we want to diversify it, we need to.
Mike?
Hi, thanks for that, Barry, and sorry to be late. My schedule conflicted itself out, so I'm able to join you. So sorry to be late. I'm just coming into this and just to weigh in briefly on the many hats of one task force, and then just being able to steward all of those conversations and responsibilities concurrently seems challenging. I like the ease of people not having to be in multiple spaces, and there's certainly some logistical ease. But I wonder if the majority are really favoring the J-POP lives within the IPRTF, I might just posit that that having a separate subcommittee where the separate nature of the work, possible separate membership just on a subcommittee, such as we have in the behavioral health subcommittee, which has been quite functional. So people that may join that subcommittee to tear into something very specific and germane to that committee, it could give you the best of both worlds. And that acknowledges Jill's point that it will probably be a quorum for the task force as a whole. But just, being able to manage that, I think there's going to be a body of work that's sizable enough that some focus, specialization, and some separate meeting structure would be
Yeah.
valuable.
So we are considering bringing in facilitation for this because we definitely agree that this is making a bigger monster, and we definitely have talked about, the Holly and Marty potential, since they've been close to this work, might be a good place to have that leadership and that organizational. It served us well before, so.
Yeah, no, it was quite effective, I think, in the SAC project and that process. You bet.
And then I do appreciate that comment, Mike. And as I looked at the membership comparison, it did seem like a subcommittee might be a good avenue. And maybe even the council was kind of anticipating that when they said that the IPRTF shall establish a J-POP committee. So like it is like a committee underneath or, in the task force. And you'd think the structure that we have with the task force would be a subcommittee to kind of keep them focused on that work and effort. And maybe the quorum issues really isn't a big deal. You would just have to notice the meeting.
I think that's the thing. It's not quorum issues don't poison the whole well. They
Right.
just you got to navigate a little differently. But,
Right. So here's the notice of the task force meeting, which is the J-POP committee, which is a
Yeah.
subcommittee of it, and everybody can attend. Is that right, Jill? Do you think?
Yes, that's correct. And that's what I do currently for the joint meetings. The joint meetings are a quorum of the full task force. So
Now, the other part of this is the one paragraph in the ordinance about J-POP doesn't have a lot of detail on what they're tasked to do. So maybe another component is to think through that. I'm not sure if that's in the implementation plan or not. But really it just says monitor the progress of the implementation plan and provide written reports of progress towards the plan goals annually. There's a couple other language about, the task force participating in the development of a population health report, such as a community health assessment, and then collaborating on the local health improvement plan process. But I kind of am reading that as task force requirements, and then there's only one little sentence about J-POP, so it might be worth us thinking through a little bit more on what type of actions and talking with council, Barry, about like what is the vision? Here's how maybe the task force steering committee sees it, but how much oversight and what are the tasks that they're interested in having the subcommittee accomplish?
I had the same thought, Tyler. The council's gonna have to have that discussion, and again, that was that 11th hour. We just didn't get to that piece.
Yeah.
Jill, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have something?
yeah, I was just going to screen share again. I read through the actual ordinance that had additional tasks in it, but you're right, Tyler, some of those are assigned to the task force and not necessarily the J-POP. So what's in your packet at the bottom of those tables, I had labeled J-POP, but you're right, I need to refine that a little bit and break it out between task force and J-POP requirements or tasks.
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah, I mean, to Tyler's point, I think we need to have like very clear, bright lines between like delineations between J-pop and law and justice and incarceration prevention, and to have very clear mission statements as to what each group is doing, and if one is subservient to the other because it's a committee or however we structure this, that's fine. And I realize that we're talking about membership here and like how to structure this thing, but I just believe that we have a very high responsibility to to everybody, to all of the community members that have voted for this and who didn't vote for this, to explain to them how we're going to be proceeding forward. And this came up a couple weeks ago in a meeting about like how do we communicate out the things that we're doing for behavioral health. And so I really want to underscore the importance of the communications part when it comes to the outward facing public nature of this.
Okay, take note of that, Jenna. That Jenna's our communications person, so she's on the call today. So, anything else on this subject? We want to bring something to the council to look at on the 23rd of this month. So, Perry?
I really agree with some of the statements that were just made as well. And this is maybe a little more detail than is necessary, but just, I guess I'll offer it up in terms of thought. Let me find it here. We were talking about on page 4 of the packet, the new positions on the IPRTF appointed by the county council. A reentry specialist, I think that's a really good idea. And I also struggle a little bit with if, for example, it were to be Lifeline Connections currently carries our contract to do jail behavioral health reentry work. I don't know that would be the best representation just because of sort of a dual relationship there. But one of the things that I could suggest, and I don't know how this fits either, we do have a response systems division staff that oversees that contract, facilitates that contract, Hannah Fisk. And I don't know that she's a reentry specialist, but I think that she's really dialed in on, the expectations, the goals, the contract, and et cetera. So I guess I just wanted to mention that because I don't know of another, reentry specialist other than the providers. And so I just thought that I would offer that thought.
Okay, thanks, Perry. Jill?
I'm hearing that the preference might be to make J-pop a subcommittee of the task force. Yeah, is that what I'm hearing? If that's the case, then I don't believe that would necessitate a change in the ordinance, Barry. The IPRTF is empowered to create its own subcommittees already, and none of the other subcommittees are in the ordinance. So I think it can be done, if that's the direction the council wants the task force to go. I think the task force can do that independently without needing to change the ordinance.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
And the other thing, again, the recovery subject matter expert, at some point I'll need to figure out how that's different from an SUD treatment provider.
Perry, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that particular subject matter expertise is a little more available in the county without necessarily getting into the challenges of, a provider and possibly bias. So I think that we could fill that because that is, recovery matter, subject matter expert. So I think that one would work, and that there are, any number of, individuals, depending on what we're actually looking for. Is it a certified, individual? Is it a supervisor? I know that there's some individuals that are out at the community college, for example, that, might be a really good choice on that part. So that's what I can offer, in that regard. I view a recovery, subject matter expert as being more general and broad than an SUD. Because it does encompass, any number of things when we talk about that terminology as far as definition. That's my thought.
Jill, did you have a follow-up with Perry?
No, I just wanted to talk about an appointment process.
Okay, well, I think Tyler might have something that's on the subject.
Yeah, I was just trying to, I wanted to ask Jill, so if there was some members that were on the subcommittee that weren't task force members, that's okay, correct?
Yes, I think if they're going to be appointed members, however, they need to be appointed by the council. I don't necessarily think that needs to be an ordinance change. I can talk to Dana about that, but I think we can just do an ordinance without amending the code, saying something like council will take on this appointment process, or maybe the council just needs to agree to that. But I think the appointments should be done by council. So we will need to designate of these positions that we don't have now. Are any of them going to be appointed, or are they going to be by invitation only? How are we going to select these extra members?
Right, so is the thought that if it is a subcommittee, those members that are task force that already play that role would be appointed to that subcommittee already?
That's up to the task force and the council.
Well,
Right.
what members are you talking about? Like the county executive, the mayor, those, or others?
Yeah, those seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
The permanent ones seem pretty straightforward for sure. The other ones, when you go back to that list, and maybe it doesn't really matter, but the appointed ones, maybe there aren't actually that many that overlap. Is it just Deborah Hawley? Or no, is it just Arlene Feld? Oh no, I'm looking at the old one.
There isn't a lot of overlap right now. It depends on who council appoints to these two vacant health and social services positions. In 2 weeks, if council appoints individuals who can fit into any of these positions.
So it would kind of be, there's a lot of permanent IPRTF members that are going to participate both at the task force and in this J-POP subcommittee. And one or two of those permanent members would probably likely become some type of chair for that subcommittee. And then the council would have to appoint the rest of these other memberships that we're looking at now on the screen to participate in that subcommittee. But you may lose a little bit of connectivity between the subcommittee and the task force if there's a large number of members on the J-POP that aren't also sitting at the task force. But maybe that's what they're envisioning.
yeah. Stephen, did you have your hand up a second ago?
No, I didn't, but I will respond to Tyler's question. My view of this from the planning team forward was that there's still a lot of work on the table unaddressed by the task force. Historical task force work that's not J-POP work. And so that was part of why I thought it made sense to have the J-POP as a task force overseeing working subcommittee, but not the task force.
That's good.
I think having special expertise on the J-POP that doesn't translate back to the task force is a good thing, because it frees the task force to do other work in addition to just the 15 projects of the implementation plan. That would be my view on that.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's a healthy mix to have some of both.
Yep.
Anything else? Perry?
Just really quick, and looking at this, and I super appreciate your work, Jill. This had to be crazy making to try and coordinate that and so forth. And maybe this is more for Jenna. It'd be really helpful as we arrive there to possibly create an org chart, kind of a format, just as sort of an at a glance. I don't know necessarily, I suppose, names and so forth, and that could make it pretty large, but if you will, an at a glance org chart that, that explains the different subcommittees and where they sit, to use Dan's terminology, subservient to the task force itself. And I'll second, I think that was the opinion that, boy, oh boy, J-pop needs to have a lot of social media representation, if that's the right word, because I would agree. What I've heard out there in the community, understandably from, specific individuals is, boy, now that we're there, I just so hope that IPRTF or whatever actually follow through with what the plan was, because the plan's a good plan. But that little bit of mistrust, maybe, or being unsure about will they actually follow through with the behavioral health component and with the, the other things that were an important, piece of that. So.
Thanks, Perry. Mike?
It sounds like there's some consensus moving towards the subcommittee, which I think has some real advantages, and I don't really have any challenges with that. And I know this isn't in the ordinance, but I just want to bring up a possible avenue to increase some representation from a community that may find it challenging to come to regular meetings, that may find it even distasteful or kind of antithetical to join as a member, but from that population, we really need absolutely critical to get their feedback and buy-in. And some on this call may be familiar, but you can create maybe an adjunct group that has its own membership, its own rules that feeds into J-pop to get some of that lived experience, for example. And sometimes people call them caucuses, but you might be able to convene and have as a charge to that J-pop group, to go beyond just the membership that's stated, but to increase that field, I guess, that has input on that. You could have a member of that group, especially if they were kind of from a population that has experienced kind of reentry or being in the justice system, to try to convene a caucus space that is separate. It'd be great if it didn't have to be Open Public Meetings Act, but I think we would want to obviously get that testimony and then have it shared. And I guess what I'm trying to do is you don't want something so big because it's unwieldy and then it's not workable and you can't get a quorum. But at the same token, you want this transparency. You want to be able to hear more voices. So it's kind of, I guess, a structural idea, and it might be a charge to whoever ends up chairing that committee to try to shepherd something that would be a little different than the task force has ever done before. And that could look more episodic as opposed to a standing caucus group. It could be going to our neighborhood groups. It could, things like that to increase that, the buy-in, but feedback both, right? To update as the plan unfolds, as construction unfolds. So I just wanted to throw that out there as, to look not just at who we can get to come into our structure, but how can we change our structure to bring that to the people we want to see.
Well, and that's Holly and Marty's wheelhouse. That's what we've done throughout the implementation process, is we've had various focus groups that were formed, for just that purpose, episodic, as you said, and we could expand that thinking to be more, I think that's a good idea, Mike. And I think that's something that they would think about doing, that kind of engagement. Jill?
Yeah, I'm gonna poke a hole in a can of worms here a little bit and just suggest that maybe while we're thinking about creating this committee, also considering whether the other committees structures still hold and are functional for the task force. Some of them have been struggling, and so I think it might be a good time to revisit those as well.
Okay. Stephen?
Just to poke a couple more holes alongside Jill. I look at this chart and it could make a little progress, but at best it wouldn't be very much progress toward our racial equity goals that we're committed to in the racial equity toolkit. And I don't know how you work around that. You can name a couple people, but that will still leave us with very few BIPOC members. The other thing is, while I like Mike's attempt to balance lived experience input, the implementation plan And really the SAC needs assessment report called for increased lived experience voices in the decision-making, not having caucuses to decide that express some opinions that may or may not be adopted. It really called for them to be right in the thick of the decision-making. And the caucus idea doesn't really do that. Even the chart that we have doesn't really do that, to me, to the extent maybe that at least I thought we were headed for in the planning process.
Dan?
Yeah, I think like bouncing off of what Stephen just said, I think that we would be remiss if we did not try to have some level of alignment with the work that's already been performed. The racial equity group, the Prop 5 that passed with the kids thing, or not kids thing, sorry, the children's initiative, declaring racism as a public health crisis, both at the city and the county level, acknowledging that homelessness is a crisis, and we've got these affordable housing issues. I just want to make sure that we do not look at the work here as programs, and we look at the work as systems and how all the stuff lines up together, and how do we, and there's been a lot of work and bodies of work that have been done by members in this group and others. And I want to make sure that we're lining up with these community values that we've stated that we support and that voters have absolutely supported. So I just want that to be kind of part of our thinking as we move forward.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. Jill, you had one other item you wanted to talk about, and that's IPTRF next meeting.
Yeah, so that's a regular agenda item for this committee, and I neglected to get it on for this meeting. So the items that I have tentatively scheduled for the January 22nd meeting are this conversation right here, the J-pop committee. And Tyler, are you still prepared to present to the full task force on the Finance Advisory Board on January 22nd? Maybe we lost Tyler.
It
So
says I'll be right. It says I'll be right back.
Oh,
I see
there
it.
it is. Okay. Yeah, so those are the two agenda items in addition to committee updates. Is there anything else for the full task force agenda for January?
So Jill, as you opened the can of worms earlier, I think discussing the committees and the changes and restructuring and what we want to do with that might be an option, and it might need to start here. Jill and I spoke yesterday after the meeting, and I don't like to hear my voice as much as I've been hearing it at the last couple legal and justice meetings. There is some participation, but we've got a lot of changes. And so I was wondering if we wanted to change. I don't want to not have participation from those members in the legal and justice community, because I think it's very important to the task force. But I also think there's so much overlap with the behavioral health. If we just went to quarterly meetings with that joint meeting that we had and then revisit that, or if it's something we need to bring to the full task force. Thoughts?
Stephen?
Two thoughts. Procedurally, excuse me, it seems a little awkward to be talking about the committee structure with the old task force when we won't have even appointed or seated the new task force who would really have the stake in those decisions. I don't know how you want to sequence that. Also, you know, we'll be a couple of weeks into the legislative session. This is back to the agenda, Jill. We'll be a couple of weeks into the legislative session. We'll have a better idea of what's on the table, what's likely to advance and what's not. The exec's office is doing a couple of things in terms of the data team and some fund seeking behavior. It just might be good to have an update and perhaps a discussion on what we're focusing on as a county level in terms of bringing resources into what we've been working on up to this point. I don't know if that's Kayla or if Tyler can make that report as well.
That would be Kayla. I can see if she'll be available.
I don't know if other people think that would be a worthwhile use of the time.
Yeah, I do. Other items people would like to see on the full task force meeting? Okay, let's move to public comment. Do we have anybody from the public here today, Jill?
We do have public comment. Before we get to that right quick, I just wanted to give you all an update under other business that we have, thanks to Pyramid, 30 plus applications for our 4 vacancies and a lot of very, very qualified individuals. So that's great news there. After the meeting, Dan and Mike, if you don't mind hanging for a bit so we can finalize the behavioral health agenda, that would be great. And for public comment, we do have one attendee and his hand is raised. Jason, go ahead and speak to the committee.
Good afternoon, folks. Jason DeForest, local business owner. As the only representative voice of our community, I attest firsthand that the community as a whole does not trust the IPRTF in its current state. The silence of the rest of the community speaks volumes to the current climate of our constituents' satisfaction. It would be appropriate for me to run the IPRTF as a victim of police brutality. However, that would first require a great deal of honesty, integrity, and accountability from the Pellingham Police Department, County Prosecutor, St. Joseph's Hospital, and Peace Health. Most importantly, incarceration reduction and prevention. In order for us to reduce and prevent incarceration, we need accountability among police, healthcare workers, and public servants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Go ahead, Barry.
Oh, is that it? Is that the last public comment?
Yeah, I don't see anyone in our conference room and we don't have any other attendees.
I just wanted to circle back to your comment about all the applicants and the work that we've done communicating, and that just shows what we've said here today, how important this public facing communication that we do is. It really works. So let's continue on. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just a quick mention, Barry, I absolutely advocate and here for you being the chair of our board of directors at the BHASO. We really need you and your structure. So sorry that ends up, impacting the schedule, but I am so appreciative of your time and energy in that regard. Jen Rose Ottaway is the new director and is certainly impressive so far as I have interacted with her. And I'm just really looking forward to developing our relationship further with the BHASO, just relative to services that are being provided in our community that are funded directly through the BHASO to providers and some of those components. So thank you.
Thank you, Perry. I had lunch with Jan Rose last week, so we started talking about how we can be helpful to her efforts from the board level. So, all right, everybody, have a great weekend, and I guess it's going to be cold, so stay warm. See you later. We're adjourned.